Well, I suppose if we're talking about Yeats, Chinua Achebe, the great Nigerian novelist, wrote a novel called Things Fall Apart. And listening to Deputy Fahy there, in that particular Yeats poem, Yeats spoke about that the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. And Deputy Fahy definitely comes to mind in that respect. Can I just say to the Minister that confidence will only return to Irish bank depositors and to Irish businesses and to foreign business in Ireland when the banking crisis is actually settled and we have a functioning banking system. And no matter what defence Fianna Fáil offer of their actions in relation to our banking crisis, which actually goes back to March 2008, when Brian Cowan was still the Minister for Finance and was waiting to see when Bertie Ahern should be taken out. On that day, the shares in Anglo-Irish collapsed. Brian Cowan, as Taoiseach, refused to do anything. He was wined and dined a month later, as he waited to become Taoiseach, by Anglo-Irish Bank, and still, apparently, he knew nothing. Now, when we actually have worked through this crisis, when this government is gone, then and only then will reliable confidence return in Ireland and in banking in Ireland and in bank deposits in Ireland. The statement by the Governor, by the Minister, and by the various European agencies, such as the ECB, in relation to guaranteeing and backstopping Ireland and backstopping deposits, are of course welcome. But we will only regain our confidence and our sovereignty when we actually see the passing of this government and we see a focus on a plan for growth and restoration of this economy and a final sorting and accounting of the banking crisis. And, you know, the Minister can try and sweet-talk us with notions that all of the Euro ministers crowded around him. Minister, I heard that they were extremely annoyed that you were not just an hour and a quarter late for the first meeting of your Eurozone colleagues, but that you were over an hour late again for yesterday's meeting. I heard that there was extreme annoyance and that people were losing patience with the way the Irish government were presenting the Irish case. I would not confuse diplomatic acceptance that Ireland is where it is and that it is nothing more than a grumbling acceptance from our European partners. I mean, the Minister and Fianna Fáil are now trying to shift the blame to Europe and to Eurozone and to partners in Europe for what they themselves chose to do when they actually went for a guarantee and they told people after they had done the guarantee. And at that time, that unilateral action by the two Brians actually caused consternation in many different parts of Europe. That's the actual diplomatic and historic record of the brave move overnight on the guarantee 2 years ago. I mean, when does denial turn into delusion? I mean, this is the question I ask myself continuously about this government. Fianna Fáil talk up a storm. They talk up a storm. But you know, it is like a snowstorm. When the storm gets so bad, you can't see. It's elemental. You're in the middle of it. But if you've lost your compass, you've no idea how to get out of the storm. And I fear that this government has been in this snowstorm now for nearly 3 years, and it still has no idea how to get us as a country with dignity and with our independence and our sovereignty intact out of this disastrous mess. There is in the United States, and it's come to Ireland recently, a series of toy shops called Toys R Us. Well, do you know what? Fianna Fáil could have a slogan for the country now, and that slogan would be, Banks are us. Because the unlimited blanket guarantee made the banks the sovereign debt, and therefore the gentlemen who are in town from the IMF, the ECB and from the Commission do not see anything other than a technical distinction between the debts of the banks and the debts of the sovereign. I'm sorry to tell Deputy Dooley that, but unfortunately, Deputy Dooley, that is the fact. And the Minister's statement was completely devoid of any information to the Irish people about who is the chief negotiator. Is it Professor Honohan? Or do we have a team of negotiators? Could we find out, please, who they are? Are they qualified people? Are they qualified people? I think that is a very reasonable question of me to ask. Are they qualified people? Have they the interests of the banks primarily at heart? Or have they the interest not only of the taxpayers, but more importantly, have they the interests of the citizens of this country at heart? I think we are entitled to know who are the teams of negotiators, and is Professor Honohan the chief negotiator? The Minister should have addressed that in his speech. Secondly, the Minister needs to tell us what is the structure and the template, of these negotiations, because we want to know what is on the table for negotiation and what is not on the table for negotiation. We have said in the Labour Party, for instance, that we do not believe it to be advisable that the Irish government, the present Irish government, should include the 12.5% corporation tax rate on the table for negotiation. Can we get a serious briefing from the Minister as to what is on the table for negotiation? It's a serious question. The people out there, Minister, the people at home really want one thing from you and from your government. The people need you as a Minister to tell us the whole unvarnished truth and nothing but the truth. That's what the people of Ireland need today if we are to work our way out of this crisis. And that's what we want from you, Minister. Forget the grandstanding about Fianna Fáil. While I'm at it, on the record, can I quote and insert in the record of the House what Professor Honohan said in his report? An extensive guarantee needed to be put in place. Nevertheless, the extent of the cover provided, including to outstanding long-term bonds, can even without the benefit of hindsight be criticised in as much as it complicated and narrowed the eventual resolution options for the failing institutions and increased the state's potential share of the losses. Sure. Professor Honohan has it in 4 lines there. It is not that a bank guarantee, is not expensive, and a bank bailout and rescue is not expensive, no matter who it is done by. I said that at the time. Check the record of my speech. What I said was that there were significantly cheaper, better and faster ways of doing it. And we did not, in the Labour Party, assent to the guarantee because we did not believe that Fianna Fáil should be given a blank cheque. And that blank cheque has turned out to be the largest cheque in the history of the state.
The member, we're in a limited debate, but Deputy Dooley has asked that you yield for a question.
No.
Very good.
So I want to finish the quotation from Governor Honan. Second, the wisdom of leaving senior management in place while providing an open-ended guarantee to two institutions. Guess which two institutions we're talking about? Could it be your friends in Anglo? Could it be your friends in the Irish Nationwide Building Society? To two institutions which it should have been clear were on the road to insolvency, does not seem to have been considered. Now, if that is not the condemnation of this pathetic government out of the mouth of Governor Honan, I don't actually know what is. So will you put that in your list of quotations, and will you quietly read it at night the way monks used to read books of prayers? Because it might actually bring forth what might be appropriate at this point is a little bit of humility on behalf of your government, so that we can work our way out of this bank. Can we actually ask you, Minister, can you set out, please, what is the proposed additional debt burden of the current discussions that are ongoing? And this is a technical question. Your Prime Minister, your Taoiseach yesterday, spoke about several possible different types of arrangement. Professor Honohan this morning spoke clearly about a bank bailout in the form of loan facilities. If what Professor Honohan is saying is correct, and I'm sure it is correct because I think most of this has already been agreed, it means that a further very large loan facility will be given, which will be largely, if not exclusively, for the banks. The interest rates at which these loan facilities will be given under the two funds that are available from Europe, particularly from the Regling Fund, Minister, as I understand it, are 3-year money. And the rates are at least on a penalty point, because Professor Regling's fund attracts, as I understand it, at least a 300 basis point charge or penalty over and beyond certain baseline interest rates. Minister, that means we're getting 3-year money, somewhere potentially around 5% and up. It means that all our debt, and this is the problem for Greece, this is the problem for other countries which go into IMF bailouts, all our debt gradually shifts, therefore, over the time that we are in this, from 10 years, being how most government debt is funded, into 3 years. So it means that we join a Red Queen's race, where we are constantly racing to try and catch up, but we can't move any further. 3-year money at 5% plus, Minister, is not cheap money. That is actually a penalty rate of interest. And is that what the government has now conceded? And is that all for the banks? And if the banks are sold, now, just listen to the questions, because you might learn something that you could tell him. Through the chair.
Deputy Dooley, if you continue to interrupt, I'll ask you to leave.
It seems to me that we had the guarantee, 6 crippled institutions with different ranges of problems. 2.25 years later, we still have...
The Deputy has 1 minute left. If Deputy Fahy continues to shout down members, I'll ask him to leave the House. 1 minute, Deputy.
Thank you. We had 6 crippled institutions. 2.25 years later, we still have the same 6 institutions, 2 of them albatrosses around our neck, 2 of them large, important banks that we would have liked to have seen restored to financial health. 1 of them seemed to have almost been there, but the current situation over the last 8 weeks has re-damaged that particular institution. Now, if we sell off these banks, or the kindness of strangers is kind enough to come and buy 1 or more of these banks, do they walk having received our Euro IMF loans, while we continue to take the liability, and more importantly, our debt to GDP ratio changes almost immediately, and we have a huge extra annual interest charge. Now, we said in Roscommon, and I'll finish with this, Professor John McHale addressed the Labour Party's away day, and we had a discussion about how we did not wish to see Ireland entering a bailout, because entering a bailout is an extremely expensive operation for the country which goes into the bailout. And I say again to Minister Lenihan that he owes to the people and citizens of this country the truth about whatever arrangements the government are contemplating coming up with. And that is why I want to know who these negotiators are, what is the cut of their approach to this country. Are they people from the Tea Party side of political and economic views, or are they people who will have the interest of the ordinary Irish citizen, the old age pensioner, the young infant, as much as the money men in the banks that Fianna Fáil has striven for the last 2.25 years to protect, while the rest of us could go hang?